Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time, welcome especially. I'm Sally. I'm really glad you're here. In today's video, I'm going to be diving into my pro-metabolic transformation or pro-metabolic journey, whatever you want to call it. Talking about kind of my health history, I guess, up until this point, and then the changes that I've really noticed since adopting a more pro-metabolic lifestyle. This video was inspired by a sweet subscriber named Rita who suggested I make this video, and I thought it could be really helpful to people, just offering a little bit of context into how these changes can really affect your life, and I guess just as a whole in terms of my story. So I'm going to be doing this like I'm just talking to a friend. I've got a cup of tea. I encourage you to grab one too. We're just chatting for a little bit, was obsessing over all the ways I could film this video, threw out my notes and decided we're just gonna talk because I think it's gonna work better like that. So I'm gonna start at the beginning. I'm almost 23 right now, hard to believe. I will be next month. And I am fortunate to have always been a pretty healthy person. Grew up a healthy kid, always active, fortunate to be in a family where they prioritized whole foods, well-balanced meals, but they also weren't obsessive about it. Like, we were allowed to have treats. It wasn't that big of a deal, and body image wasn't this thing that was like constantly being shoved in my face. It wasn't really something I was thinking about as a kid, especially as a younger kid. And I've always been pretty hardy, like I would say hardy, not just healthy, when it comes to like sickness coming into the house. I felt like I always had one of the stronger immune systems, and I don't know, how true this is, but like compared to my brothers, I would always be like, I have such a better immune system than you. I got better so much faster. I don't get sick as often, blah, 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 which I think is true to some extent. And it's actually interesting to think about because I'm the oldest of three. And now that I know what I know about like mineral stores in the mother's body and how a mother passes her minerals to her baby and how those are then depleted for both the mom herself and her future children in the most part, unless like things are being done to really replenish them. And also knowing what I know about how minerals affect your immune system and literally every other system in your body, I'm just wondering if that has something to do with it. Obviously that's anecdotal evidence, but it makes me curious to always kind of look at different families and like the health of the different children and like how hardy they are and wonder like, who got all the minerals? So anyways, if I did, thanks Mom, I appreciate it. But like I said, very healthy kind of family upbringing. I wouldn't call it the standard American diet in the sense of the junk that Americans tend to eat, but in terms of just, I don't know, good but relatively simple foods. Like usually there is a vegetable on the table, like steamed broccoli, steamed green beans, that's what tends to come to mind, some sort of protein, and like brown rice, some sort of carbohydrate. And yeah, I mean, that's how I ate the whole time that I was in the house until I was probably 10 or 11. I do not remember the exact age that this happened at, but at some point I did go vegetarian full time after kind of like dabbling in it on occasion. I had at that time a pretty strong ethical conviction. We'll say I've always really loved animals and felt really passionate about them and just didn't feel like I should be, eating meat. I don't need to get into the reasons because y'all know them. For context, now I do eat meat, obviously, and during the whole time that I was vegetarian, I would eat it on like holidays because I always loved it. Like I never stopped liking meat. I always loved it, but just said, I'm not gonna eat it because it's wrong. I no longer really have the ethical conviction, not because I don't love animals. That could be a whole nother topic, is like vegetarian, almost vegan into pro-metabolic, so to say, but I think regardless of whether you're looking at it from a scientific evolutionary perspective or you're looking at it from like more spiritual perspective, I don't have an issue, I suppose, with eating animals at this point. I would say it all comes down to how are the animals raised and are they treated with respect, essentially, and stewarded well in that time. I digress. Anyways, probably around the time I was 10 or 11, I went vegetarian, aside from just eating meat on holidays. And after probably a few months of that, though, I was not feeling my best. It wasn't anything too crazy, but I think my energy was a little bit low. And so I went to the doctor and she just asked, would you be okay with eating fish? And I decided, okay, well, fish probably can't suffer, like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. I decided to eat fish. So then I was pescatarian up through probably my sophomore year of college. I don't know how many years, but I want to say it was like 7 or 8 years at least that I was at least mostly vegetarian or pescatarian. And my dad very sweetly was super accommodating with it. He would always make things like tofu, or we'd have cod or something like that to make sure I was still getting plenty of protein. So at least while I was in the house, I would say that I ate a vegetarian diet about as healthfully as you can. And I certainly do think that with a lot of intention, people can do it healthfully. But as I got older, kind of cut out dairy mostly from my diet with very good intentions. My mom is pretty like sensitive to dairy, like genuinely so. And with that kind of coming up, I started doing research into all the inflammation that it causes, XYZ, everything you've ever heard about dairy, and decided like I also as an older teenager was going to cut it out, like rarely have it. I would still have ice cream, I would still have treats, but I wouldn't just like drink milk. And whenever it was like applicable, I would use a nut milk, oat milk, some alternative like that. When I got to college, it was definitely, it was easier in a way because there were so many options, but harder in a way because those options weren't the best when it came to being vegetarian. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, which is like a minor league granola school, we'll say. So they did have like a vegetarian vegan section, and I mean, I'll still say to this day, oh my gosh, so delicious, but these things called soy nuggets, which is like super duper processed soy protein in like this sweet sauce of some kind. So definitely not the highest quality protein, great for your body. Things kind of went downhill. Eventually I started eating meat again, felt fine about it too, because at that point I just didn't have the ethical conviction. During that time, I was super into certain vegan YouTubers. I've talked about them before, like Ellen Fisher, Hannah McNeely. Not that they would ever see this, but I still love you guys. I think you're amazing, and I really appreciate your content, even though I choose a different lifestyle than you. But I was super kind of into that realm, and was thinking for a while, oh, maybe I'll go vegan, or there was even a while where like raw veganism was really big. This was still in high school. I couldn't do it because I was still living under my parents' house, but I would kind of try to dabble in it. And then kind of the parallel storyline is that when I was a younger teenager, that was really the first time that I started dealing with like body image issues, I would say. Nothing too crazy, but there were some people in my life, not my immediate family, please no, it's not them, but just like some people in my life who struggle with their weight, and the narrative I was told is, oh, well, you look great now, but later on in life, like when you're my age, you're gonna get really fat. There's nothing you can do about it. And that really fueled this resistance in me to like gaining any weight, getting chubby at all. And obviously I did gain weight, like I was still growing. But my mindset wasn't always the healthiest, as I think is probably true with any girl. Thankfully, I never had to really deal with an eating disorder or anything like that, but thinking about it more than a young teenager should be, and getting upset about things like the belly fat that I had, which is like totally normal when you are a young teenage girl and your body is in that stage between being a kid and being a woman. And may I just say, normal to have a little bit of belly fat no matter how well you are. Okay, we're gonna pick back up with kind of my sophomore year of college when I stopped being vegetarian. Wasn't eating a ton of meat. I would say I was just eating a pretty normal diet. It was pretty healthful, but nothing too crazy. And again, I was never really extreme at this point about anything. I wouldn't really eat dairy. And I try to source my meat really well. Obviously on a college student budget, I couldn't do that all the time, but I did the best that I could. And I was really into fitness at this point too. So I started teaching fitness my freshman year of college, kind of went up in the ranks, and still a full-time fitness instructor, if I can get those words out, at this time. And obviously there can be ways in which you're doing that are not great for your metabolism, but thankfully I think in terms of fitness itself, I've always had a pretty positive relationship with it. Not overdone the cardio, been into a lot of strength training, that kind of thing. But with school and fitness combined, what I would find is even if I'm eating enough, I'm not eating frequently enough. And there would often be really long gaps in my day where I was going without eating, and obvious just blood sugar spikes up and down. In fact, the blood sugar stuff is something that I've been dealing with ever since I was a kid. I have distinct memories of being at a Christmas party, for instance, and my dad coming up to me because I was really upset and just like with a piece of chocolate, just like putting it in my mouth, like, Sally, you just need to just eat this chocolate, and just feeling so much better because my blood sugar, I'm spilling tea all over myself. Excuse me, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. As I was saying, always kind of had issues with my blood sugar just crashing really quickly, and in college, I definitely wasn't the best at managing that. And I would say I stayed at about that point all the way through the past couple years, eating a pretty healthy diet, not managing my blood sugar very well. When I got married, it became especially apparent how hangry I would get. Like one minute I would be fine. For instance, we would go to church, it would be okay, I'd be getting hungry, we'd try to go somewhere afterwards, and it would like, a switch would just totally flip. I'd just get really angry, and I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to be mean, I just like, you literally can't talk to me right now, because I'm just so keyed up. And I wouldn't always realize that I was hungry, and sometimes it will get past the point of me actually being hungry any longer, but then as soon as I got something to eat, I would feel a lot better, but then I'd feel really sleepy, because again, I'm just riding that blood sugar wave. Going back kind of to the anxiety that I mentioned, when I was a lot younger, I got it under control, and it didn't really come up again until my last year of college, with everything going on in the world. This was like just at the start of COVID. With everything going on in the world, I just found myself in an incredibly anxious place where I was waking up having panic attacks, and like it was the very physical symptoms of anxiety that were presenting themselves. I'd feel incredibly nauseous, my stomach would just be really upset as a whole, I would be shaky, I like thought I was sick. It was awful. This would happen every once in a while that I would wake up, just couldn't go back to sleep, and then there was just this underlying kind of hum of, I guess, stress. I wouldn't even call it anxiety at that point. That would come up, and eventually I got kind of a handle on the anxiety or panic attacks themselves, but I think that's when I really became aware about how stressed I was living. Just that state of stress that wasn't going away is when things didn't go to plan. And like, I'm saying this is just up until, again, I really started prioritizing this lifestyle. When things wouldn't go to plan, I would be incredibly tense, incredibly like worked up about just having to reschedule or like reorder events. And it wasn't like I couldn't be spontaneous. It was just like, if there are plans made, like we better stick to the plan. And if plans are not made, I'm like incredibly anxious, which part of that is just me being type A, like that's just my personality. But I think it was heightened by me not taking care of my blood sugar as well as I should have been. And I didn't really realize the extent to which this was the case until I started making the changes that I did in my life. So I know I've been talking for a long time, but at this point I'm really getting into the part of the changes that I noticed, I guess, when I adopted a pro-metabolic lifestyle or started making those changes. It wasn't that long ago. Honestly, it was about 6 months ago, and I'm still noticing a lot in my body. I think I still have a long way to go. I have always had like cold hands and cold feet, but I didn't realize that that was related per se to my metabolic health. I also have always had since I've been tracking, had pretty low basal body temperatures. Often like 96 point something pre-ovulation, and if you want to know why I check my body temperatures, you can definitely check out my why I don't use hormonal birth control video. I go in depth about that. But even if you're not using it to track your cycle, what it will do for you is just give you a good indication of where your metabolism is at. Words are hard. So kind of lower body temperature, cold hands and feet, and then that stress. For the most part, I would say I slept pretty well, but there would be periods of time where it would be more like anxiety, not even like upset or like panic, but just couldn't shut my thoughts up, would keep me from sleeping, which I will say haven't been dealing with anymore. So about 6 months ago is when I really began making changes in my life. I had been listening to the Freely Rooted podcast with Fallon and Corey, and I found the Are You Menstrual podcast, two in particular that I really just dove into. I think I listened to every episode of both of those. And at the same time, I have another friend, my sweet friend Elisha, who is also getting into the pro-metabolic space, really learning a lot about her body, and just overcoming some things that she had been dealing with. And it took a while for me to actually start implementing these things, but I was just fascinated by everything I was learning about bioavailability of nutrients and just about minerals and everything they affect in the body. So one week I was getting ready to go, shop for groceries, and I told my husband, I was like, hey, I'm gonna make a few different things this week. I have a little bit of a different plan. He thought I was crazy, but I said, just bear with me. I wanted to get stuff for adrenal cocktails. I wanted to order some grass-fed gelatin so I can make some gelatin gummies, but just bear in mind, those aren't even the first things to start with. It really is just eating every 3 to 4 hours, not drinking coffee on an empty stomach, like eating within your first 30 minutes to 1 hour of waking. It's those pretty simple, practical things that you can do that I would encourage to be your first step. But went to the grocery store, made the gummies, made the adrenal cocktails, or got the stuff to make the adrenal cocktails, and that next day I was just like, okay, we're doing this. I'm gonna try to follow these principles, incorporate a few new things into my diet, and I've been getting more and more into it. I started doing the raw liver shots, which I still need to be better about doing consistently, but doing those, taking a magnesium supplement that's like a really high quality one, and being more intentional about sunlight, etc. And in that period of time, or since that period of time, the biggest thing that I have noticed is when it comes to my stress and when it comes to my anxiety, just that underlying hum of tension of like, ooh, things better go right, it's just gone. I mean, gone in terms of it controlling my well-being. I definitely still feel stress and feel anxiety at times, but I feel like in those times I'm able to recognize it and just be like, okay, we're fine. Just much better at letting go of the things that I don't have control of. I never realized how drastic of an effect my diet had on my mental state, but there is no other way to put it, or there's no other thing that I could say is responsible for the change that I felt just in my mood as a whole and my stress levels as a whole, than prioritizing my blood sugar balance and working on getting kind of my minerals replenished or building my stores where I haven't necessarily in the past. So that's by far the biggest thing. And then when stressful situations come up that are more acute, again, just being able to handle that, I think, with an even temper has been a lot easier. In terms of my cycle, a big thing that people are striving for are pain-free periods, and while I haven't gotten there yet, I am definitely in a place where I feel much better in kind of that luteal phase of my cycle and then my menstrual phase of my cycle. My period's been coming much more consistently. It's always been pretty consistent, as I said in a previous video, but I feel like now it's just down to the day, and it's very consistent in terms of its length, and not just the length, but flow from day to day. I won't get too much into that, but there's that. And then I think during the luteal phase, so about the 2 weeks leading up to my period, is where I've noticed the biggest difference. Number one, I used to break out pretty consistently in this time. I will still often notice literally 1 or 2 pimples. They go away pretty easily, but as a whole, my skin has been so much better. And that's another thing, I didn't realize it myself, but the number of people who have told me my skin looks amazing. I'm like, well, thanks. I just doing the same thing I have been, but I think it really is my diet and even just blood sugar and stress management that has made such a difference. So there's that. And anyways, in the luteal phase, obviously hormones are still very kind of low at that time, kind of crazy. But what I have noticed is that I'm not getting as like upset as I often would in the week leading up to my period. I will still get grumpy, but I'm not finding myself just like breaking down in tears, which I was pretty consistently finding myself, doing before I started making these changes. Also, kind of on another note, it has to do with my hair. I don't know if you can really see it, but there's some spots right here where my hair is just a little bit thinner. And I had never really had an issue with my hair thinning out or anything like that. But in the past, or in the few months leading up to when I started kind of adopting this lifestyle, I was noticing that it was getting really thin and almost patchy there. When I started making these changes, it's really grown back, gotten a lot thicker. I still kind of have a hairline that just like goes back in these areas, but there and in my eyebrows, I feel like there's definitely like increased thickness as opposed to what was there before. I am so sorry if this has been rambly. Again, I told you, like, I kind of threw out my notes, was like, we're just gonna have a chat, and I know it's been really long at this point, but those are probably the biggest things I've noticed. Biggest thing being is mental well-being and stress and anxiety as a whole, how I feel leading up to my period, the length and consistency of my period, and then just like hair and skin health being another one. So I still think that I'm pretty early on in this journey, and I'm excited to see what other things I notice in the months to come. But please don't hesitate to leave a comment if you have a question. I'm gonna stop it here. If you do like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.